Well, thank you very much for staying with us on the show. We're now getting to our big stories after sports, and we're going to be contemplating two crucial issues like we tabled for you at the start of the show. One, we're going to be looking at the IGP's appearance before Parliament. In camera, though, so we're not going to have a full scope of what exactly is going to transpire. I'm just thinking, though, we had for George Alex Mensah a very open, together with the others. But that's what's going to happen today. We'll be delving into that issue, matters arising, the developments up to this point in time, and what we can expect, maybe from the fallout, everything that has happened. What's the way forward? We'll also be contemplating on this belt before we touch the hour of 9. We'll also be looking at the Electoral Commission and that decision to go ahead with the registration exercise at the district level. Barring the interlocutory injunction that has been placed on the process by 5 political parties, including the NDC. All of those matters this morning on the drawing board. But we have joining us this morning for a discussion right here in the studio. We have Dr. Kwapong. It's been how long now since the last conversation we had? Definitely over a month, because I've been away for about a month.
Yes. But I've joined, I think, in the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
About twice, but
you've
been missing in action. Okay.
So, Dr. Is it John Osai Kwapong?
Osai Kwapong.
Sometimes Johns in Ghana have a certain presidential. So all the Johns until Nana Akufo-Addo came around. So we're going to start the conversation on these two matters. But there's something I'd like to touch base with you on before we go. But even before that, just skipped my mind. Let me also welcome aboard Kweku Paintsel. He's a lawyer. He joins us via the phone line. Mr. Paintsel, a very good morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
Oh, I nearly forgot about you. I nearly left you in.
Nearly doesn't kill a bird.
It's good to have you. It's good to have you this morning. We also have Adib Sani joining the conversation, of course. He is a security analyst, and he'll be sharing with us his thoughts as well on the IGP situation. Mr. Sani, a very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Benji.
It's good to have you. I hope you're well.
Very well. Thank you for asking.
Great. Let me start in the studio. Just hold for me, gentlemen. Let me start in the studio. And I know this was not discussed as a preliminary part of the conversation, but what do you make, gentlemen, starting with you, Dr. Osai Kwapong, of what has happened in terms of the comment by former President Mahama that the courts are being packed? And the responses that have come from all 4 speakers yesterday at the Ghana Bar Conference, scathing remarks from the president. Then we heard from the Chief Justice herself. Then we heard from the attorney, in fact, before the Attorney General, the Ghana Bar Association president. All of them going hard against Mr. President. With everything that has been said, would you say either party is wrong? So all 4 of them together at the Ghana Bar Conference versus former President Mahama and everything he's been saying in terms of the court system. And I'm just looking for, I'll just run this by you. I have a list of the appointees by different presidents over time to the Supreme Court. The only one that is missing for me, and I'm still trying to get the figure there, is Kufuor. Kufuor actually, former President Kufuor, he actually had some appointments as well, and I've confirmed that now. So Rawlings, okay, had in a period of 19 years, 11. We have John Evans. Okay, so let me do it in order. Former President Kufuor, 17 in total. That is for a period of 8 years. Then Atta Mills, for the brief period, 3. Then for Mahama, 4. So if you add the period Atta Mills to Mahama, 7. Rawlings, 11. Kufuor, 17, like I've mentioned. And now for Akufo-Addo, in 7 years, 15. Of course, you also have to take into context, and please feel free to draw my attention to anything I may have missed, but this is what I have for now. Of course, that is also in response to any, I don't want to say vacancies, but retirements and all of that also come in. How do you feel about this entire bit, stacking the courts, and is there any reasoning? And should we even expect judges to be wholly apolitical? Is it just when they are ruling or generally? I mean, what is your take?
Right. So I think on the question of, the number of appointees that have got into the court, I always say that in our context, it seems like when the rules says, when the rules doesn't say you cannot, we tend to interpret it as it means I can and I should, right? So we don't have a specific number of, or we don't have a cap on the number of justices that you can have on the Supreme Court. We just have a minimum number. And so long as you're sort of, going by, well, it says a minimum of X. And so it doesn't put a cap, on, well, it's a minimum of this, but it can't go beyond this number. Then you would always have these issues coming up. It depends on, like you said, vacancies, retirements, whether a president, feels like I have to have enough, on the court at any time to deal with the caseload, et cetera, et cetera. But if you want to move away from this conversation of the parking of the courts, particularly at the Supreme Court level, then for me, one of the ways you want to do that is through a constitutional amendment that actually caps the number of justices that you can place on the court.
Do you think we need that?
Yes.
You think we need a cap?
Yes, you need a cap.
In Ghana, I'm saying
yes,
in our context,
Ghana,
do you feel we need a cap?
Yes. If you are going to be able to get away from this increasing sort of difficult conversations around who is parking the court and the quote-unquote perceived bias or lack thereof, of the court. Justice or judges, right? These are, they are citizens first. I'm sure they all have, their political leanings. They vote in elections, even before they get to the court or even before they are appointed. That, for me, is not necessarily the problem. The problem is, are you able to suspend all of those, political feelings, allegiances, etc., when a matter comes before you in which you are expected to deliver justice in an impartial and fair way? And this is not even in just the case of the courts. For institutions that are supposed to be independent and non-partisan, that is always the expectation. It doesn't mean that you would not have partisan people, quote-unquote, working in there. By partisan people, I mean people who have affiliations to political parties. Not everyone overtly shows their partisanship, although it may be there. So the key thing is, how do you ensure that there is that perception of impartiality or fairness in the delivery of justice? And for me, that is the thing that I find worrying about this conversation, especially when public perception of our courts, as per the Afrobarometer, is not at its best as at the moment. And so these conversations just deepens that mistrust, in the institution of the court that we are seeing in Afrobarometer. And therefore, I can understand why those who responded to President Mahama's statement responded so strongly, right? That there's a feeling of we must protect the institution of the judiciary.
That's an interesting take because, of course, you can talk about the fact that when Mr. President, for example, was speaking about corruption, and since all of this was at the Ghana Bar Conference, let me just link it in before I bring in Kweku Pencil. When he was speaking, he made mention of the fact that a Ghanaian judge must be a reassuring presence and the epitome of fairness. He goes on to talk about the fact that the judiciary would inspire confidence or should inspire confidence in the citizenry and the courts seen as arbiters when disputes arose. Of course, if that confidence is eroded or if people feel, if I bring this person to you, I'm not going to get justice in the end, then everything is lost. Just tied to that, and I'll give the rest of you gentlemen the same chance. I will not gloss over it because it's tied to what we are saying. Mr. President also says, my government has taken the boldest initiative to fight corruption since independence. That was also yesterday. Any quick thoughts? I just noticed that it had been posted on Joy News on Facebook. You can check out the details and share your thoughts. I'll read them. Your take?
So my quick take on that is, so for example, you can give him credit for promising during the election that he would set up an office of the special prosecutor, eventually goes through with that promise. My key thing is, if all of these efforts have been made to fight corruption in a way that nobody else has fought corruption since the attainment of independence, then the question that I have for Mr. President respectfully is, why then is public perception still at its lowest when it comes to the issue of corruption? It was at a healthy level in 2017 Afrobarometer. But if you look at 2019 and if you look at 2022 Afrobarometer, the perception has been going down in terms of how people perceive the level of corruption, how people perceive the fight against corruption, and how people perceive corruption in key institutions. And so for me, that's what I keep asking myself and the point I keep reflecting on, that if we fought so hard, why is it not being reflected in the court of public opinion, which is just as important?
It's like the work we do here, it's not about the effort you put in, it's about the results.
Exactly.
And so whatever you do, the team must produce.
Exactly.
Like on the show. So you can't tell me that, I'm working so hard, but I'm constantly getting an F.
Exactly.
Where's the result of your effort? Mr. Painter, let me come to you on those 2 points as well. Stacking the courts or packing the courts or padding the courts, whichever way you want to look at it. And the numbers over the years, 11 for Rawlings over 19 years, 17 for Kufuor over 8 years, 7 for Atta Mills Mahama over that period, 8 years, and for Akufo-Addo, 15 up to this point. And what he says about corruption. Quick thoughts, Mr. Painter?
May I seek a clarification from you, because as President Mahama made a general statement about the court, he did not limit it to any level of the court and any effects, whether Supreme Court, whether Court of Appeal, or the High Court. He made general statement. Is there a reason why you want to limit it to the Supreme Court?
I'm talking about the numbers to the apex court, especially when our Constitution, in terms of stipulation, when it comes to when it comes to some cases, like we've seen with the electoral petitions and all of that, it goes to the apex court. So that's why I am focusing on that.
No, but I think you are not being fair, because you see, Mahama was talking about 80 or more judges. And I'm going to make this point because when we're talking about more judges, we are talking about more courts. Because you have not even looked at, the opening of more courts at more levels. We now have got Court of Appeal, for instance, in the region. We've got more courts which have been opened, or rather been inaugurated by Nana Akufo-Addo more than any other president. And every court that gets inaugurated, of course, there must be a judge of that court. So anybody who talks about passing courts and whatever, without going, descending into the details of how many courts are now in operation. I'll still come and answer Supreme Court inquiries, but I'm quite alert for the why you must concentrate on the Supreme Court, because the general issue is not even about the Supreme Court at all. But I need to answer that question, that more courts have been opened, more courts have been inaugurated by Nana Akufo-Addo's presidency, more than possibly all the other presidents combined. I've not looked at the specific statistics, but I'm just talking about more facts. Manchester, for instance, they've now got a district court, circuit court, high court. At the same time, in Accra, more courts are being opened everywhere, every nook and cranny. So that, for me, explains why more judges have to be appointed to fill the more courts that have also been inaugurated.
As the courts are being opened and as they need justices to ensure that justice is actually served, which I am wholly in agreement with, does it matter whether those who are appointed have any clear political tinctures or affiliation? Does it matter?
It matters a lot, very greatly. But in law, he who alleges must prove. You have the burden. And you see, that's why I'm worried that an ex-president will make such a sweeping statement, and we've got people who also will support or rather will defend that kind of statement. Elsewhere, they've got what they call fact-checking. In other words, if you come out to say that Akufo-Addo or the current president has appointed about 80 judges who are pro-MPP, come on, what are the facts?
So the blanket statement is the problem. But in another instance, if you have someone, for example, who has tried contesting, let's say as a parliamentary candidate with a certain party, and the person gets an appointment on the bench, how do you feel about that?
Please, everybody has got a political persuasion of a sort. And it's what we try to do in this country is that we scandalize everybody by reason of the person's act, whether political, whatever it is. And we do not believe that once somebody has had a certain political persuasion, for instance, when he comes onto the bench, he will be able to deliver justice according to the tenets of his calling. I mean, that's a scandalization. It is very embarrassing for me that, anybody could, for instance, make that statement. But then, it doesn't mean that such characters also do not exist. But it comes back to fact checking. Take them one by one. Take the person. Say this person was of this political persuasion, and when he got into the judiciary or he got onto the bench, it shows either his ruling, his judgment, his perception in the things that he says. Bring those facts out. Other than that, you see, what you're trying to say is that any time that somebody has shown by argument, by anything that he does, that he belongs to a certain political persuasion, then that person cannot become a judge.
Okay.
Very, very unfortunate.
All right. Quick thoughts. Quick thoughts on what Mr. President says about corruption, very quickly.
Mr. President talked about facts about all his appointees who had issues that he referred to the various the various investigative bodies who came out with their findings. It's fact for fact. If anything the president said anybody disputes it, he must come out and tell us that this fact is disputed. But that's what he has said. But you see, the issue about perception is the most dangerous thing that we can talk about. Because in Ghana, perception is fueled by politicians. When you've got an ex-president who would have facts, for instance, come to talk about corruption at the bench, and that the NDC will also get ready, as if the bench is open for only political parties. Then when he has said that, it goes out, and everybody without facts begins to parrot what Mr. Ex-President has said. And so that, if within that context, you go out to conduct any research, however scientific, it's going to come out because that is the perception. And it's our politicians who are killing us, the whole country, poisoning the country with unchecked facts. And that is my worry. Because you see, when you were making this point, my mind was going back. And I remember as you said, for instance, that at the end of the day, it is what people can feel, people can see. That is, in physics, the definition of work is force times distance. So in physics, however hard you push a rock or a stone, if it doesn't move, no work has been done.
Right.
Okay? But that is it. By the end of the day, if you go back, let me just give this one example. I remember that during the tenure of President Akufo, I remember very well that the banks came down to the level where they were virtually sending people into people's offices to come for loans and wherever. You saw how liberalized the economy had become and how the banks themselves were working efficiently, effectively. Notwithstanding that, everybody was allowed to cry of everything against President Akufo, second term, so much noise. Eventually went out of office with much more discredit. I wouldn't say discredit, but not the same popular perception that we had. But today, when we look at what is going on now, we will say that that time was better than today. And so the point I'm making is that however hard a president will work, we are human beings. Things may not be the way that everybody expects, everybody wants. And it is only fair and proper that the citizens, people like you and I, can make noise because we all want improved conditions. But as to the level of perception of corruption itself, if that's been measured outside the public perception, it's another factor altogether. So I don't really want to make too much noise on that point. Other people are there. I will have opportunity to talk about same or similar issues as we proceed.
All right. Thank you very much. There is a study, though. I keep reflecting on that when I speak to guests from the Ghana Statistical Service with support from one of the UN agencies. This was sometime last year, I believe. I think late last year. That was not perception. It was the reality. That's the only real, context of corruption. And that also was very damning. I believe that may have been, I don't know, I think that was around the time of the Afrobarometer report as well. Adib Sani, thank you for staying on the conversation. On the